Super Mario Galaxy 1 and Super Mario Galaxy 2 are my favorite games of all time. I know that's probably one of the coldest video game takes you've ever heard, but there's a reason why these games are held in such high regard. The 3D Mario lineup of games have consistently been recognized as some of the most innovative in the industry. Hell, Mario 64 alone pretty much defined the 3D sandbox platformer genre. And yeah, on the surface, Galaxy 1 and 2 are just another case of Mario reinventing the wheel yet again. But there's more to these games than that. I truly think that Super Mario Galaxy and Galaxy 2, to me, are some of the most magical and special games of all time. And in this video, I'm going to explain why. Buckle up, because it's going to be a pretty long one. So let's talk about how we got here. At this time, there were two previous 3D Mario games. Well, 2.5 if we include Super Mario 64 DS. Super Mario 64 laid the groundwork for that 3D Mario formula we've all grown to love. You have a sandbox hub world with entry points to levels, each having a number of missions. This was further experimented with in Sunshine with more gimmicks and gameplay mechanics. And then again, if we do include 64 DS, you can talk about how it was the first to really take advantage of the hardware it was running on, specifically with the Nintendo DS's touchscreen. So Mario at this time kind of built a reputation for having some of the most experimental and innovative platformers in the industry. And with Nintendo's brand new console, at the time codenamed Revolution, people anticipated something even bigger. But what we actually got is somewhat of a switch up to the formula. But that by no means ended up being a bad thing. The earliest remnants of Mario Galaxy actually stem all the way back to before Sunshine's release. In 2000, at the Space World Trade Show, Super Mario 128 was shown off to the world, a simple tech demo to demonstrate the capabilities of the GameCube and eventually the Wii's hardware. It featured 128 Marios on this flat disc-shaped surface that could morph and shapeshift, really emphasizing how much creative freedom the developers had with things like environments. And while this tech demo laid the foundation for many of Nintendo's projects, Super Mario Galaxy absolutely ended up being the main event. Development for Galaxy started in late 2004 and was set to be Mario's next grand adventure for the Nintendo Wii. And on November 12th, 2007, Super Mario Galaxy was officially released in the United States. This game is different, like very, very different from Sunshine and 64. This is a space adventure, and they heavily took advantage of what that entails. This game has a very cinematic feel to it, and it's one of Galaxy's defining aspects. The presentation is off the charts. You have the CG cutscenes, the atmosphere, the tone, the music. It all combines to create what I personally believe is the most ambitious Mario project yet. The atmosphere really drives it all home. This game perfectly captures that sort of peaceful emptiness that comes with outer space. In the opening of the game, when you wake up on the gateway, the camera pans out and shows the planet all alone, with nothing else around it. That is one of the many examples that perfectly demonstrates how this game is set apart from previous Mario games, all of which had a lively, fun tone. Galaxy feels a lot more melancholic, but also adventurous. This is further captured with the fantastic soundtrack. It's mostly comprised of orchestral compositions, and it's definitely the main contribution to this game's cinematic feel. There's a reason why Galaxy is still regarded as having the best soundtrack in the entire franchise. The music meshes with the atmosphere to create a grand, adventurous feeling, and it works flawlessly. Visually, the game is also very stunning, especially for the Wii. There's a lot of visual variety too, it's not all just empty space. I do think that some of the set pieces in this game kind of take away from the immersion of being in outer space, but there's nothing drastic that completely takes you out of it. All in all, Galaxy does a fantastic job at making the player feel a certain way, and the gameplay further contributes to that feeling. Throughout the game, you travel to a number of different galaxies, each containing several planets that each have their own gravity, meaning that as the player, you have the freedom to travel all around them. You travel between planets using the launch stars, which launch Mario at sonic speed to the next planet. The gravity mechanics of this game were quite unique at the time, and they still remain as a cool and novel concept today. I feel that many games attempting a space aesthetic don't quite capture the actual feel of space as well as Galaxy does. But with the planet-to-planet structure of Galaxy, it does introduce a lot more linear level design than what we were normally used to from 3D Mario. Each galaxy has a number of missions, most of which contain a point A to point B setup that has you collecting a star at the end. This is a stark contrast to the more open-ended setup that was present in both 64 and Sunshine. And while it's completely understandable why some would prefer the setup of those games over Galaxies, I personally think that the more linear setup is widely beneficial. There's a lot more level variety in this game, ranging from the sizes of the levels to the environments to pretty much everything else. There are a ton of galaxies in this game, 42 to be exact, and while yes, many of those have fewer stars and fewer planets, there's still so much visual and gameplay variety. A lot of that variety does come from Mario's controls, and this is by far the most controversial aspect of the Mario Galaxy games. Mario's movement is not nearly as free as one might expect. In fact, I would say that Galaxy is actually one of the most limiting 3D Mario games in terms of movement. But it's not bad at all. Mario's definitely a lot floatier than usual, you know, obviously due to the whole space thing. The developers knew from the start that Mario needed some sort of ability to counteract his movement limitations, and that's where the spin comes in. When using it, Mario spins around in a circle, and it's used to attack enemies, which is a lot more fun than just jumping on them. But more importantly, this spin ability is also used as a double jump, and yeah, it does effectively help with Mario's movement limitations. In fact, I love platforming in this game, but there's a catch. Motion controls. This is the controversy I was talking about. Yeah, this was a Wii game, meaning that for a lot of Mario's abilities you had to shake the Wii remote, and that includes the spin. Yes, it does get a little tiring having to shake the Wii remote every time you want to double jump, and I am thankful that it was made purely optional in the Switch remaster, but there are other level specific gimmicks that require the motion controls, like the Stingray races and the rolling ball missions. They kinda suck. It really is the biggest downside of Galaxy, and it sucks even more when you realize that it doesn't have to be this way. Motion controls could have very easily been made optional, but again, it is the Wii after all, so it's to be expected. The Wii Remote's pointer capabilities are also used for the on-screen Starbit cursor. Starbits are the main currency of this game, if you will. You'll end up needing Starbits for plenty of things, unlocking levels, moving prankster comments, all of that junk. You'll definitely end up wanting to collect a lot of these things, and the cursor makes collecting them pretty fun. Just point your cursor where you want to grab them, and boom, Starbits. Pretty cool stuff. There are also a few level gimmicks that use the pointer, like the pool stars, the bubbles, and all of that. I really do appreciate its use in these scenarios because it just enhances the immersion and variety, which if you couldn't already tell, this game has a lot of fucking variety. I do think it's a little awkward using the Starbit cursor on Switch or on an emulator because you don't have that precision that came with the Wii Remote and the sensor bar, but it works fine enough. This is also essentially the first 3D Mario game to incorporate traditional Mario power-ups, such as the Fire Flower and the Star. Mario 64 and Sunshine had their own versions of power-ups. Like 64 had the different caps which had different functions, and then Sunshine did something completely different with the flood nozzles. With Galaxy, yeah, you just pick up an item to get the power-up. It's very simple. I do really like Galaxy's power-up selection. You have the Bee power-up, which gives Mario the ability to fly for a short period. There's the Fire Flower, which lets you shoot fireballs on a time limit, and then the Ice Flower lets you skate across water, also on a time limit. The Boo power-up lets you float and phase through walls, and this one is probably my favorite, but the Spring power-up is the worst thing ever created, and it's actually one of the worst power-ups in the history of the series. Moving on. And then there's the Red Star power-up, which unfortunately goes pretty underutilized in this game. It's only used for one mission, and then after that, it's only available for you to fly around in the hub world, which is really unfortunate because it's such a cool power-up, and I wish more levels took advantage of its capabilities. But that's kind of another issue that people may have with this game. The power-ups are only available to use in specific missions. You cannot use them outside of said missions. So they're basically just used as stage gimmicks, which again, this game has a lot of those, but I still appreciate their inclusion. So let's take a step back and talk about the Comet Observatory, this game's hub world, and over time, I've actually grown to kind of dislike it in a way. It's a giant spaceship that houses domes, each of which includes an access point to a number of galaxies. So in 2D Mario terms, the domes are basically the worlds, and the Comet Observatory is the world map, if that makes any sense, I don't know. The aesthetic is cool. I really like how it becomes more populated and alive as you progress through the game, and I also like how the domes are all places that you would see in a home, like the kitchen, the bedroom, the library. It's neat. It's just kind of a chore navigating, especially when you're jumping between domes. Speaking of the domes, we already mentioned how they're used to access the galaxies, the main big ones each having 6 stars in total, with a couple having 7, which I'll explain later. Usually there are 3 normal stars, a secret star, and 2 prankster comets per galaxy. Secret stars are found within other missions, and usually there's just a hidden launch star or hungry Luma that brings you to the secret star. I like this idea a lot though, because it encourages exploration exploration, even if the levels are very linear. Prankster comets also appear sporadically, and each type presents a distinct challenge. The speedy comets have you racing to the end of the stage under a time limit, the cosmic clone comets have you racing against a double of yourself, there are the fast foe comets that speed everything up, and the daredevil comets have you fighting a boss with only one hit point. These are very fun, and it's nice having missions that sort of switch things up. My only issue is that when prankster comets show up in a galaxy, you are required to either play them or pay the Hungry Luma in the hub world to move them. When active, you're not able to select any other mission, and I think that's a poor design choice. It does get kind of annoying when you're just trying to play the normal missions. I still like the concept though. On top of prankster comets and secret stars, some galaxies have green stars, and they function the same way as secret stars. The only difference is that collecting all of them grants you access to a few more galaxies. So for completionists, there you go, more content. Grand stars are collected at the end of each boss level, and there's one of those per dome. After collecting a grand star, you're granted access to the next dome. So progression is also straightforward. It kind of takes a lot of cues from 2D Mario. You play a few levels, you fight a boss, you move on, and I appreciate that. The bosses that show up throughout the game are pretty cool. They all take advantage of gimmicks that you learned during the mission, so I think they're a cool way of kind of testing your skills. My only issue with the bosses and a lot of the galaxies is that near the latter half of the game, there are a lot of reused assets. Boss refights, level rethemes, the whole 9 yards. It kind of sucks. It is kind of unfortunate to see how much was recycled in Galaxy. I still like the latter half of the game, but it does start to feel like filler. Regardless, for completionists, there is a shit ton of content in this game, and we haven't even covered all of it. But we have to talk about the story element of Galaxy, and this is yet another thing that sets this game apart from every other 3D Mario game in existence. Yeah, you heard that right. A story in a 3D Mario game. It was unheard of. Sure, you always had some story elements with the plot and specifically the spoken dialogue in Sunshine, but having actual large stakes and lore in a Mario game was never done before. The plot itself is not the craziest thing, it's just the standard save Princess Peach formula, but on a way bigger scale. Like, instead of Bowser kidnapping Peach and taking her to his castle, he rips her fucking castle out of the ground and brings it to the center of the universe to start his galactic empire. Like, yeah, that's a little different. Again, with the whole cinematic thing. But then there's Rosalina, a new character introduced in this game. Now, on the surface, she just seems like another Mario princess, except she has a spaceship that she uses to look after the Lumas, and she wants to help us save Peach while we help her get the Comet Observatory up and running again. But her character is way deeper than that. As you progress through the game, you unlock more pages for Rosalina's storybook, which can be read in the library. And as you go through this book, you begin to realize the emotional weight of her backstory. It's really well put together stuff, and to this day, it appalls me that this is even present in a Mario game. Fun fact, Shigeru Miyamoto actually didn't want any story like this, so Yoshiaki Koizumi, the producer of the game, put it all together in secret, and thankfully when presented to Miyamoto, he approved. So without that happening, we wouldn't have any of this story in the game, and that's really crazy to think about. Again, when you think of a Mario game, you rarely ever think of narrative. You think about gameplay. Nintendo has always been a company that prioritizes gameplay over anything else. But when I personally think about Galaxy, I think about the gameplay, yes, but that story also plays a huge factor in what makes this game so special to me. But we're not done yet, because this game has a significant amount of post-game content, further enhancing its replayability. When you beat the final Bowser fight for the first time, you unlock the purple prankster comets, which show up in every major galaxy. These comets have you collecting 100 purple coins, sometimes on a time limit, and I've always been mixed on these. The shorter ones are fun and present a unique challenge, but the ones that spread these coins out across the entire level and it takes like 10 minutes to collect them all, yeah, those are a chore. I wish all of them were sort of confined to one area and on a time limit, but that's just me. When you collect all 120 stars and beat Bowser again, you unlock the ability to play the entire game again as Luigi. This is cool, but Luigi isn't really all that different from Mario control-wise. He has a floatier jump and he slips around easier. But when playing the game as Luigi, it's pretty much just the same thing. But don't worry, there is a reward for collecting all 120 stars as both Mario and Luigi. And I didn't feel like doing that for this video, so I guess I won't spoil it for you. But it's really nothing crazy. So with that in mind, I think there's a significant amount of replay value in this game, which even adds some challenge in places that were once a little too easy, which I do appreciate. But yeah, that's Super Mario Galaxy. This game still means a lot to me, and it remains as one of my favorite video games of all time. Does it have issues? Yes. Is it perfect? No. but the good completely outweighs whatever bad this game has. And there's not a lot of that at all. It's a 10 out of 10, and I will probably never change my opinion on that. And if you didn't already know, a lot of people feel the same way. This game had some of the most substantial impact on the series we have ever seen. It will always be remembered as one of the greatest pieces of Mario's history. But then something strange happened. Super Mario Galaxy 2 is a very unique case. Out of every 3D Mario game ever released to this day, Galaxy is the only one that got a direct sequel. The decision to make a follow-up to the first Galaxy game rather than just making a brand new game was due to multiple factors. For one, Galaxy was very successful, so people were already hooked on the formula, and the developers just had so many other ideas that they did not implement in Galaxy 1. In fact, Galaxy 2 was originally developed as just an expanded version of Galaxy 1, under the names Super Mario Galaxy More and Super Mario Galaxy 1.5, but eventually it evolved into the full sequel we have today. And it only came out a few years after Galaxy 1, which is just kind of crazy to think about because nowadays we have to wait years on end between 3D Mario releases. Now, Galaxy 2 had different goals than Galaxy 1, specifically when it comes to both gameplay and presentation. The aesthetic and atmosphere of Galaxy 1 were the game's defining aspects, which is why it may be a shock to hear that Galaxy 2 goes in a completely different direction. While Galaxy 1 had a more grand yet melancholic atmosphere, Galaxy 2's is a lot more fun and bright. Very rarely does this game ever feel like a space adventure. Instead of having the galaxies take place in the vast openness of space, most of them have this cloudy, more Earth-like backdrop, which is even present on the game's key art. Visually, the graphics are pretty on par, which is to be expected because it is running on the same hardware as the first game. The music is also really good, and while there aren't as many orchestral tracks in here compared to the first game, there are still a handful that emit that grand cinematic feeling, even if the actual environments and art style don't complement it that well. Don't get me wrong, I like Galaxy 2's aesthetic and presentation, but it really doesn't fit with the outer space setting. I'm sorry. It's just not nearly as cool, I guess you could say. And with this, along with other new additions, Galaxy 2 does not do a good job at separating itself from the traditional Mario formula. Good examples include the galaxies. The level design is even more linear and obstacle course-like than it was in Galaxy 1. I love the level design in Galaxy 2, and in fact, it actually gets pretty challenging at times. The platforming is very fun, and the ideas presented in Galaxy 2 provide even more variety than ever before. Every single new galaxy presents a new gimmick or a new power-up. There are also a lot more galaxies in this game, and that's partially due to the fact that each galaxy has fewer missions, which does end up working in the long run because you are never bored for the most part. And that's something that I can give this game over Galaxy 1. But it does also hinder the immersion because these planets that you travel to rarely even feel like planets. Every level in Galaxy 2 just feels like a floating Mario level. Again, the space theming is completely lost here in favor of a more traditional feeling Mario platformer. How you access these galaxies also contributes to this. Instead of having a massive hub world with multiple entry points to a solar system of galaxies, you have a world map that works pretty much like a 2D Mario game. You get a star from a galaxy and you progress through the world, and there's an enemy base at the end with the grand star for you to progress to the next world. Simple as that. There are also branching paths that are sometimes unlocked by hungry Lumas, but that's as complicated as it ever gets. And to be honest, I kinda prefer this. It keeps the action going when you exit a galaxy. As much as I love the Comet Observatory, it did get annoying jumping around the hub to access different galaxies. In Galaxy 2, all of that is simplified to just a few button clicks on your controller. The world map setup of Galaxy 2, while yes, it does take away from the immersion just a little bit, I think the trade-off is worth it, especially for that world map music. Oh my gosh, it is amazing. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves because there is a hub world in this game, that being Starship Mario. Okay, I wouldn't really call this a hub world, but more so a museum of sorts. It evolves over time, just like how the Comet Observatory did. As you meet more NPCs, they show up on Starship Mario. It's really neat. But that's really all this ship has to offer, which is fine because it does help keep everything more streamlined. And that's the best way to describe Galaxy 2 as a whole, actually. The presentation is more simplified, which you may prefer, and in some cases I prefer it myself. But again, there's just something about how things worked in Galaxy 1 that gave that game a very unique identity. While the core gameplay of Galaxy 2 is practically unchanged from Galaxy 1, there are a plethora of new gameplay additions. The main one being the inclusion of Yoshi. He was all over this game's marketing, making his inclusion the defining feature of Galaxy 2. And yeah, Playing with Yoshi is pretty fun. He's basically a glorified power-up. You find Yoshi eggs in certain galaxies to hatch him, and then you can flutter jump and use the pointer controls to eat enemies and other items. Already, I think this is a much better way of utilizing the Wii's pointer controls than what was going on in Galaxy 1. Instead of just using the pointer for starbit collecting and random other gimmicks that show up every now and again, it's a crucial control method for Yoshi, which you use several times throughout the entire game. But Yoshi's benefits do not stop there. You also sometimes encounter 3 different types of fruit, which when eaten give Yoshi a timed ability. The dash pepper lets you blast off at sonic speed, allowing you to run across water and on walls. I like this mechanic. I think it gives the game a nice change of pace at times. But the dash pepper in particular feels a little underutilized. I just feel like there could have been more levels that used it. The blimp berry inflates Yoshi and lets you float upward for a short period of time. Unlike the dash pepper, I am not a fan of this one. It's kind of clunky to control, and it's annoying to navigate obstacles with in my opinion. Thankfully though, like the dash pepper, this one is also not used that much. But then there's the bulb berry, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is only used in like 2 levels. It's really only used for stage-specific gimmicks, as when eaten, you reveal a hidden pathway below you, and that gimmick is only used in a couple of galaxies, making the power-up itself nothing more than a stage gimmick. Overall though, I think Yoshi's inclusion was a great idea. Regardless of whether you think Yoshi's inclusion is underbaked or not, you have to at least admit that it did a lot to give Galaxy 2 a more unique identity. But if you ask me, the new standard power-ups introduced in Galaxy 2 are much more interesting. The Cloud Flower. Yeah, this thing is fucking awesome. You get a few clouds that function as platforms for you to stand on at any time. It's a completely broken power-up and can be used to skip large chunks of levels. The Rock Mushroom lets you roll into enemies. Now, I like the idea of this power-up, but it is a bit awkward to control, and honestly, in all of the instances it's used, it's not very fun. The only instance where I actually liked it a lot was in the Melty Monster Galaxy in the second mission, where you have this obstacle course that you have to use the rock power-up to roll through. I wish there were more like this. And then there's the drill power-up. It's okay, I guess. It works fine enough for the levels you use it in, but it does limit your platforming capabilities a lot. I will say though, these power-ups do render themselves a lot more useful in certain situations, like with collecting comet medals, a new collectible in Galaxy 2. Long story short, each galaxy has a comet medal, and when you collect the comet medal, you unlock the Prankster Comet for that galaxy. Yeah, that's it. It's just an extra requirement to unlock Prankster Comets, which actually do have a few differences here. The Speedy Comets are still here, but instead of having one long timer, you start with 30 seconds and you have to collect clocks to raise your time. It makes these comets a lot more suspenseful. I love it. Daredevil Comets are also still here, but they don't have any differences. Purple Comets now show up as normal comets, they're not a post-game feature. The Cosmic Clone Comets have multiple Marios instead of just one, and they follow you around this time, so you have to be quick. And new to this game are the Romp Comets. In these, you need to kill a number of enemies within the time limit. The Prankster Comets still present a fun challenge to switch up how you play the game, and I'm glad they kept them. The bosses in this game are also pretty fun. I think they're just as good, if not better than the Galaxy 1 fights, especially when it comes to the Bowser fights. Like Galaxy 1, they effectively test your skills with the new mechanics you learned throughout the galaxy. Replay value is something that I think Galaxy 2 has a lot more of, but the execution is a little questionable. Real quick, I want to briefly talk about Luigi because he is playable in this game. Before beating the game, you will occasionally find him in certain galaxies, and you can play as him for the duration of the star. But after you beat the main game, you can play as him whenever you want. But there's no separate save file, so you do not need to play the entire game twice to achieve full 100% completion like you needed to in Galaxy 1. But back to replay value. First, there's just a lot of filler, and it actually starts before the post-game. Once you get to World 6, you'll notice that the galaxies somewhat fall off. You have galaxies like Throwback, which is just a remake of a Mario 64 level, Battle Belt, which is a cluster of enemy rooms, and then Slimy Spring, which honestly feels kind of like cut content from the first game with its atmosphere and design. But after you get through all of that and beat the game, then you unlock World S, which is a world full of small galaxies consisting of rehashed planets from Galaxy 1, lazily designed gimmick-oriented levels, and a boss rush. Like, what is going on here? Were they really that out of ideas? I think they needed to do this to get to that 120 star mark, to keep it in line with Galaxy 1's total stars. But no, that's not all. Once you collect all 120 stars, every galaxy gets a set of green stars to collect, doubling the amount of stars you have collected thus far. Initially, I didn't mind the green star missions. Think of them like the star coins from the new Super Mario Bros. Games. They're just kind of another collectible hidden in random spots within the normal star missions. But when replaying the game for this video, I realized just how tedious collecting these things are, especially if you already know all of the locations beforehand. Every time you collect one, you're booted back to Starship Mario and have to go through a series of pop-up power-ups and menus to get back to the galaxy to collect the next one. It gets annoying very quickly. And yes, it's like this for the normal missions too, but those missions lasted way longer than the majority of these Green Star missions. Some of them are over in like 20 seconds, meaning that the combination of menus and loading screens you have to go through sometimes takes up even more time than the actual mission. But thankfully, there is a pretty cool reward for collecting all of them. Grandmaster Galaxy, the ultimate test of skill. This game started the trend in 3D Mario games of having one massive challenge level to cap off the game. And while the first mission is not too terrible, the Prankster Comet mission, the Perfect Run, has you going through this entire gauntlet with one hit point. And yeah, it's pretty fucking difficult on a first playthrough. Hell, I remember as a kid, I 100%ed this game all the way up until this point, but I just could not get past this level for the life of me. So I just gave up and did not pick this game up for another few years, I'm pretty sure. So Galaxy 2 has a lot of content, and that's a good thing. But with more than half of the 100% playthrough being filler, it's hard to really appreciate that extra content. But I think one of the major differences from Galaxy 1 is the absence of any story element. Remember, Galaxy 1, outside of its more cinematic feel, had some actual lore with the storybook. That is completely absent in Galaxy 2. And before you ask, no, the new storybook in the Switch remaster doesn't count. There's still a plot, which presents itself as basically a watered-down version of Galaxy 1's plot. Bowser still kidnaps Peach during the Star Festival and all of that, but the stakes don't seem nearly as high. And once you save Peach, there's not some crazy emotional ending like the first game. Yet again, it just feels like a poor retelling of the events of Galaxy 1. There are a lot of theories surrounding how this game's events fall into the canon. It's heavily implied that Galaxy 2's events are just a story being told by Rosalina to the Lumas, but at the end of the game, we see the Luma walk in with Mario's hat that it took during the game. So it's like this f***ed up alternate timeline of Galaxy 1. It's the most confusing shit. But it's clear to me that this was done to keep a more traditional Mario game feel. And actually, that's the perfect way to describe Galaxy 2 as a whole. Super Mario Galaxy 2 is practically a reimagining of Super Mario Galaxy 1, with a more traditional Mario feel in mind. The level design is more linear, the story is pretty much non-existent, and the presentation is streamlined. All signs show that the goal with Galaxy 2 was not only to fully realize the ideas that were left over from Galaxy 1, but it was also to make a more entry-level Mario game with the Galaxy branding. I still love this game to death, but with all of the filler in mind and considering the lack of things that made Galaxy 1 so special to me, I still prefer the first game. Galaxy 2, if I had to give it a score, would probably be a 9 out of 10. It's still a must play, and I highly recommend playing it if you haven't yet, but Galaxy 1 is the better game. But despite the ups and downs of these games and the critiques I've given them throughout the runtime of this video, the Super Mario Galaxy games are truly magical experiences. Without a doubt, they are the best games I have ever played. And again, that sentiment is shared among a lot of gamers for a reason. Mario reinvents the wheel all the time and constantly introduces new ideas and mechanics. But there was just something about the Galaxy games that did it differently, and that's why they will always have a lasting impact on the gaming scene. But that's all for me. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all later. Goodbye.